What's up, guys? You're about to watch a clip from our latest episode of our podcast, The Atlantic Files. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe below, hit the bell for notifications. We go live every week with all of our new episodes. This is where we talk about the NBA's new resting policies, and we give our explanation and our opinions on all of it. Thanks for watching. So, for those listening and not watching on YouTube, what are the new rules? So, they first implemented the resting policy back in 17-18. That was
not the year, the 2017.
Yeah. 2017-18 season.
Like you're thinking like the covered wagons here.
That was the first time they prohibited resting healthy players for any of like the nationally televised games and things like that. And if you violated it, you would be fined at least $100,000. And then there was rules that prohibited teams from resting multiple players or resting players for away games. Those are now going to be replaced with a more stricter policy. More stricter is definitely not good English, but you people know what I'm talking about. They're calling this the PPP, the Player Participation Policy. Under the policy, it says that is expected to be approved Wednesday, teams must comply with these rules. No more than one star player is unavailable for the same game. As an example, the Boston Celtics would have to ensure that either Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum is available for each game, unless both players are determined to be injured. They would not be allowed to rest both players in the same game.
I mean, are we? You can come up with any element on the planet you want to.
Agreed, and I'm very interested to see how they actually enforce that.
If I say to you, I have a headache, how are you going to prove that?
Right.
I have a headache and I have a stomach ache, and my leg hurts.
When they talk about like calf contusion, which essentially just means bruise,
right?
Like, how are you going to deem?
How about this one? I'm too depressed tonight. I mean, so what are we doing here?
That one especially, because the moment you say, "Are you really depressed?" then it causes
then you got a whole nother problem.
Yep, then it's an uproar.
I commend the NBA. Were you done? I mean, I think we.
There's still some more rules, but
all right, go ahead.
So the other one.
But I mean, I think we got it in a nutshell, though, right?
Kind of. So that was one.
Okay,
You can't rest two star players in the same game. Number 2 is teams must ensure that star players are available for national TV and the in-season tournament games. So you can't rest them for the in-season tournament. Then 3 is teams must maintain a balance between the number of one-game absences for a star player in home games and road games, with a preference for those absences to happen in home games. So essentially, they just want to make sure they're not being rested more often in away games, because if they... because essentially you have more chances to see them at a home game if you're around that area than they would be going to an away game. That's essentially all that is. And then number 4, teams must refrain from any long-term shutdown or near shutdown when a star player stops participating in games or plays in a materially reduced role in circumstances affecting the integrity of the game. Essentially what the Thunder did with Gilgeous-Alexander at the end of the season, when they knew they weren't competing for anything, they just shut him down. This says, example is when the Wizards shut down Bradley Beal for the last 10 games of the last season with what they were deeming, quote, knee soreness. Those kind of things, the teams would be investigated and probably fined for violating this policy.
How are you going to prove his knee's sore?
I have no idea. And the last one is teams must ensure that healthy players resting for a game are still present and visible to fans.
For one, this is why people hate basketball. When you have to come out with a thing that says you make sure they play, For one, they're getting paid millions of dollars, and you still have to remind them to play.
Yep.
The only thing that's going to get through to them is to hit them in the wallet.
Exactly.
If you find the team, who cares? Each owner's worth $1 billion. Think the
Yep.
owner's going to care? No. Obviously, the Warriors don't care. They've been paying luxury taxes for years. So, my whole thing is like, NBA, it's cute that you were trying, but for one, you kind of created this by creating prima donna players.
Yep.
Two, why are you going to take it out on the people who, one bad apple ruins it for the bunch or whatever the hell it is? But so now you have teams that weren't violating it who could use it when it is beneficial in a from a strategy standpoint, like a wise thing to do. To guys who are probably you can think of like maybe 5 to 10 guys who are like habitual resters
Yep.
who kind of ruin. And it's always the same guys, the same clowns that have made a nightmare for everybody. And I'm talking about Kevin Durant, talking about Kawhi Leonard, I'm talking about Kyrie Irving, like guys like that who are the superstars of the league. Now, all of a sudden, because they act like a bunch of morons, now the guys who actually would benefit from having a night off. And for one, too, if you're like, I didn't even finish that sentence, but who cares? If you're a player, all right, and you go and you sit and you like Anthony Edwards was 100% spot on. That's why I love him. I'm like the dude's playing. He's like people like pay to watch me play.
Yeah.
Like don't take this for granted. There are parents who can only afford to take their kids once a year, and some
If that.
once every couple of years,
Yeah.
because it ain't cheap to go in an NBA game.
Even the tanking teams now are pretty expensive. The cheapest I've ever seen was the like thick of the Sixers tanking days. You could buy like a row of seats for $10. And that was because that was historically bad. But even the
And
teams like
I
San
mean, $10 to some people.
True. But like even the Spurs and teams like that now that are tanking, they're still pretty expensive. Like nosebleeds are still like $50 a seat.
Oh, the Spurs could take all day, but people are still going to go to that and watch and play.
Exactly. So none of that shit is cheap, especially to people who might be in a hard time, but their kid just idolizes, their favorite player and just wants to see him, and that's all he wants to do, and like maybe that's what he wants for Christmas or she wants for Christmas. Like it's.
And they look
I
forward
also
to
agree
it.
with Anthony Edwards. Exactly. And it is dumb that they have to actually put rules into effect just to get you to fucking play the game.
I think you just got to find people like significant amount of money
Yeah.
in order for this to stop.
Or if it was that big of a deal, maybe start the season like 2 weeks, 3 weeks earlier so there's no back to backs.
But that's not going to happen because they'll figure out how to they'll bitch about that, So there's always constant bitching.
I know. And it's funny too because now we have all the technology and research and science to show the best ways to recover after games and training and everything, best ways to train, best ways to eat, best ways to do this and that. And like one of the things is like, yeah, well, players need rest to make them last the longest. And it's like, okay, but are they doing all the other things to last that long too? Like we know LeBron was playing damn near every game for 15, 16 seasons until he got older because he invested in a fucking private chef. He invested all this money into like a private gym, private trainers, all this kind of stuff, and has been doing all that on his own time off the court. So what are these other guys doing? Are they doing that too? Are they like
I mean,
that's on
granted,
them?
not everybody can afford that, but that's where the team has to step in. And I mean, sure,
Kawhi
these
Leonard
guys.
could afford it.
Oh, absolutely. He just doesn't want to play. I mean, he could show up at the Colorado State game with no problem.
Yeah. Tyler says, I agree. If you miss games, you should lose money.
Tyler.
That's the only way it's going to change anything. It's really it.